It began subtly, the way rot starts in a beautiful piece of fruit, from the inside out, completely unseen until the structure collapses. For 10 years, my life was that perfect, unblemished apple. I had a husband who seemed to adore me, a home filled with light and laughter, and a relationship with my mother-in-law that, while sometimes cloying, I mistook for genuine affection. We were a team, the three of us, or so I believed. My husband, the charming and ambitious breadwinner, his mother, the doting matriarch who lived just a few blocks away, and me, the supportive wife who managed our lives and nurtured our dreams. The illusion was flawless, meticulously crafted, and I was its most devoted believer. Then my grandmother passed away. She was the last of my blood relatives, a sharp, fiercely independent woman who had built a small empire from nothing. Her death left a gaping hole in my heart, but it also left me with a substantial inheritance, a sum of money that could change our lives, secure our future, and finally allow us to pursue the dreams we'd always talked about. My husband and I had spoken of it in hushed, excited tones, paying off the mortgage, starting his own business, traveling the world. The money wasn't just currency, it was freedom, it was possibility, it was the tangible result of my grandmother's lifetime of hard work entrusted to me. His mother was equally enthusiastic, perhaps even more so. She would sit at our kitchen table, sipping tea and mapping out financial strategies with an unnerving fervor. "You must be smart with this," she'd say, her eyes gleaming. "Invest it wisely, protect it. A windfall like this can disappear if you're not careful." I thought her concern was touching, a sign of her maternal instinct extending to me, the daughter she never had. I saw her as a financial guardian, a savvy older woman guiding my naive optimism. I now see it for what it was, a predator sizing up its prey. The first sign, the first hairline crack in the facade, was so small I almost missed it. My husband started working late. It wasn't unusual for his industry, but the frequency increased, the excuses becoming vaguer. Client dinners turned into weekend conferences. Urgent projects bled into all hours of the night. When he was home, he was distant, his phone perpetually glued to his palm, angled away from me. A new passcode appeared on it overnight. "Just for security," he'd said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Company policy." I, the trusting wife, nodded and accepted it. Simultaneously, his mother's advice about the inheritance grew more specific, more insistent. She spoke of a private wealth management firm her friend used, one that offered incredible returns but required absolute discretion and a hands-off approach from the client. "They handle everything for you," she explained, her voice a smooth, persuasive purr. "You sign the papers, transfer the funds, and they do the rest. It's the safest way to protect your grandmother's legacy from market volatility and taxes." She arranged a meeting. A slick, fast-talking man in an expensive suit laid out a series of complex charts and graphs, spewing jargon about diversified portfolios and offshore accounts. It felt overwhelming, deliberately confusing. My husband, who was at the meeting, nodded along, seeming to understand it all. He squeezed my hand under the table. "She's right," he whispered. "This is the smart move. It protects us. It protects you." I felt a flicker of unease, a small voice in the back of my mind reminding me of my grandmother's final words to me on the subject. "Trust no one with this but yourself." But I silenced that voice. These were the two people I trusted most in the world. Doubting them felt like a betrayal, so I signed the papers. I authorized the transfer of my entire inheritance into the hands of a stranger, reassured by the two smiling faces beside me. That night my husband was more attentive than he had been in months. He made dinner, opened a bottle of our favorite wine, and spoke glowingly of our future, a future now secured by my brilliant decision. His mother called to congratulate me on my financial prudence. I went to sleep feeling safe, protected, and deeply loved. The feeling didn't last. The late nights continued, the distance grew colder, and the secretive phone calls became more frequent. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would shut down, accusing me of being paranoid, of not trusting him. "I'm working myself to the bone for us," he'd say, his voice laced with indignation. "And this is the thanks I get," his mother would echo his sentiments. "He's under a lot of pressure, dear," she'd tell me over the phone. "This new investment portfolio comes with a lot of responsibility. You need to be his peace, not his stress." They were a united front, skillfully turning my concerns back on me, making me feel like the villain, the ungrateful, suspicious wife. I started to doubt my own sanity. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the stress of my grandmother's death was making me see shadows where there were none. I tried to let it go. I tried to be the supportive, trusting wife they wanted me to be. The tipping point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sorting through the mail, a mundane task that would detonate my entire world. Tucked between a credit card offer and a utility bill was an envelope from a bank I didn't recognize. It was addressed to my husband, but it was our address. Curiosity, or perhaps a primal instinct for survival, got the better of me. My hands trembled as I steamed it open over the kettle, feeling like a spy in my own home. It was a bank statement for a checking account I had never known existed. The opening balance, dated just 2 days after I had signed away my inheritance, was for an amount that made my blood run cold, exactly 1/4 of my grandmother's legacy. The transaction history was a roadmap of my husband's deceit. There were regular, substantial payments to a property management company for an address in a neighboring city. There were transfers labeled child support, school fees, and medical bills. And there were dozens of withdrawals from ATMs near that same address. My mind couldn't process it at first. It was like reading a language I didn't understand. Child support, school fees, we didn't have children, he didn't have children. The statement shook in my hand, the numbers blurring through the tears welling in my eyes. The name on the account wasn't just his, it was a joint account held with a woman I had never heard of. That night I didn't confront him. I couldn't. The shock was too profound, the betrayal too vast. I watched him across the dinner table as he talked about his stressful day at work, the lies flowing from his lips as easily as breath. The man I had loved for a decade was a complete stranger, a phantom. I felt a chilling emptiness, a void where my love and trust used to be. My grief was quickly hardening into something else, something cold and sharp, the need for truth. The next day I became a detective in the ruins of my life. I used the information from the bank statement as a starting point. I looked up the property management company and the address of the apartment he was paying for. I searched the woman's name from the joint account on social media. Her profile was private, but her profile picture was not. It showed her smiling with her arm around my husband. Between them stood 2 small children, a boy and a girl, both with his eyes. The picture was a dagger to my heart, twisting with an agony I had never known. This wasn't just a mistress, this was a whole other life. A secret family, his mother had to know. The seamless coordination, the financial advice, the way they both managed my perceptions, it was a conspiracy. My inheritance wasn't in some high-yield investment fund, it was funding his double life. My grandmother's legacy, her lifetime of toil, was being used to pay for another woman's rent, another woman's children's school fees. The rage that filled me was a physical force, so potent it left me breathless. It was a cold, pure fury that burned away the shock and the tears. They had not only stolen my money, they had stolen my reality, my past, my future. They had made a fool of me, banking on my love and my trust as their greatest assets. I drove to the address on the bank statement. I parked across the street and watched. I saw the woman come out with the 2 children. I saw her kiss them goodbye as they boarded a school bus. And then, an hour later, I saw my husband's car pull up. He got out, carrying a bag of groceries, and let himself into the apartment with his own key. He walked in like he belonged there, like it was his home. And I realized, sitting in my car, that my home, our home, was just a stage for the greatest performance of his life. I sat there for a long time, the engine off, the silence in the car a roaring in my ears. The betrayal was absolute. The pain was indescribable. But as I watched the window of the apartment where my husband was living his other life, a new feeling began to crystallize within me, pushing aside the grief. It was determination. They had underestimated me. They saw me as a naive, trusting fool they could easily manipulate. They thought their greed was smarter than my love. They were wrong. They had started a war and I was going to finish it. The plan began to form in my mind, not in a rush of emotion, but in a slow, deliberate, and icy calm. They had used their greed to destroy me. I would use their greed to destroy them. They wanted money. I would make them crave it, grasp for it, and in doing so, they would lose everything. The game was on, and they would never, ever see me coming. I drove home, my face a mask of placid normality. When he walked through the door that evening, complaining about traffic and his long day, I smiled, kissed him, and asked if he was hungry. The performance of my own life was about to begin. The days that followed my discovery were a masterclass in self-control. Every morning I woke up next to a monster, and every morning I smiled, made him coffee, and packed him a lunch, my hands steady while my soul was screaming. I had to become a better actor than he ever was, to cloak the raging inferno inside me with a veneer of quiet, wifely contentment. His mother would call, her voice dripping with false concern, asking how I was, how our investments were doing. I would tell her I was wonderful, so relieved to have my finances in such capable hands, and I could almost hear her preening through the phone. They were so confident in their deception, so assured of my ignorance, that it made my task both harder and easier. Harder because the sheer audacity of their betrayal was a constant, bitter pill. Easier because their arrogance would be their undoing. My first step was to gather intelligence. I couldn't fight an enemy whose resources and strategies I didn't fully understand. I needed to know everything, every account number, every password, every dirty little secret they had. I started with his home office. Late at night while he was asleep, snoring softly beside me, a sound that now made my skin crawl, I would slip out of bed and into the room he thought was his sanctuary. I used a keylogger I'd purchased online, a tiny USB device that was undetectable, to capture every keystroke he made. Within a week I had what I needed: passwords to his personal email, the secret bank account, his social media, and most importantly, the online portal for the wealth management firm his mother had recommended. The firm, of course, was a sham. A quick search of the company name revealed it was a shell corporation registered to a P.O. box, with my mother-in-law listed as the sole director. The slick website and glossy brochures were all part of the elaborate theater they had constructed. My inheritance hadn't been invested, it had been funneled directly into an account she controlled. From there, she had been dispersing it to my husband to fund his second life, likely skimming a significant portion off the top for herself. Her greed was even greater than I had imagined. Armed with their passwords, I became a digital ghost, silently observing their world. I read their emails, their text messages. The conversations between them were sickening. They spoke of me as the golden goose, laughing about how easy I had been to fool. They planned their future, a comfortable life built on my grandmother's legacy once they had bled me completely dry. His mother was encouraging him to persuade me to sell our home and invest the proceeds with her firm as well. She trusts you completely. One of her messages read, "We need to maximize the opportunity before she gets any funny ideas." They discussed the other woman and the children with a chilling casualness, as if they were a legitimate part of the family I simply hadn't been informed about. This wasn't a secret he was keeping from his mother, it was a project they were managing together. The evidence I gathered was meticulously organized and backed up in multiple secure cloud locations. I had screenshots of their conversations, bank statements showing the flow of money from the Shell Corporation to his secret account, and copies of the fraudulent investment documents. I had everything I needed to destroy them legally, but a simple divorce and a lawsuit felt insufficient. It was too clean, too quick. They had subjected me to a slow, torturous, emotional death. Their punishment needed to be commensurate. It needed to be personal, drawn out, and it needed to be a direct result of their own character flaws, their boundless greed, and their patronizing belief in my stupidity. My plan began to take shape. It would be a long con, a mirror image of the one they had pulled on me. I needed to create an illusion so tantalizing that they would walk into the trap of their own free will. My counteroffensive started with a performance of newfound financial curiosity. I began asking my husband questions about our investment. I'd bring it up casually over dinner. I was reading an article about market trends, I'd say, feigning a thoughtful expression. "Do you think our portfolio is properly diversified? Should we be more aggressive?" At first, he was evasive, feeding me platitudes he'd clearly been coached by his mother to say. "Don't you worry about a thing, it's all being handled by the best." But I was persistent, framing my interest as admiration for his financial acumen. "I just want to understand," I'd insist gently. "You and your mother are so smart about this stuff, I feel like I should learn from you." I could see his ego inflating with every compliment. He began to educate me, explaining the complex and completely fabricated strategies the firm was using. I would listen with wide-eyed fascination, making him feel powerful and intelligent. Next, I needed to introduce the bait. Through my research, I discovered that my mother-in-law had a weakness for high-risk, high-reward real estate ventures. She had lost a significant amount of money a few years back on a speculative commercial development. She was a gambler at heart, convinced she could spot the next big thing. This was the chink in her armor. I created a fake identity, a high-powered investment consultant from a boutique firm in Switzerland. I built a convincing online presence for him, a professional website, a LinkedIn profile with glowing testimonials, and even a few fake articles in obscure financial journals mentioning his Midas touch with international property markets. Then I began to subtly plant the seeds. I left my laptop open to an article about a massive new luxury resort and marina being developed in a small, up-and-coming Mediterranean country. The article, which I had written myself and posted on a convincing-looking blog, spoke of staggering potential returns for early investors. I made sure my husband saw it. "Wow, look at this," I said, pointing to the screen. "Imagine getting in on the ground floor of something like that." I saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. A few days later, I mentioned that a friend of a friend had connected me with a consultant who specialized in these kinds of exclusive, offshore opportunities. "She said he's a genius, but he only works with a very select clientele," I mused aloud. "It's probably way out of our league." By framing it as something exclusive and unattainable, I knew I would pique their interest. Greed and ego are close cousins. The desire to have what others cannot is a powerful motivator. I let the idea simmer for a week before making my next move. I told my husband that out of sheer curiosity, I had reached out to the consultant. "I just sent an email. I never expected to hear back," I said, my voice full of feigned excitement. But he replied. He said he's intrigued by our portfolio and might be willing to have a preliminary chat. This was the crucial moment. I needed them to believe this opportunity was real and that I was their gateway to it. That evening, my husband had a long, hushed phone call with his mother. I knew they were discussing my news. Their greed was overriding their caution. The next day, he approached me, putting on a serious face. "Honey, about this consultant, my mother and I have been talking. We think it's a fantastic opportunity, but it needs to be handled carefully. These international deals can be complex. Let us talk to him. We have more experience in these matters." It was exactly what I had hoped for. They wanted to take control, believing they were once again outsmarting me. I pretended to be reluctant. "I don't know, he seems very particular. Maybe I should handle the initial contact." This only strengthened their resolve. "Nonsense," his mother said, joining us for dinner that night to present a united front. "We'll protect your interests. You found the opportunity and we'll handle the execution. We're a team, remember?" I reluctantly agreed, handing over the fake consultant's email address. From that point on, I was playing both sides of the chessboard. In the evenings, I was the dutiful wife, listening as my husband and mother-in-law excitedly discussed their communications with the brilliant Swiss consultant. They would forward me the emails, gloating about the progress they were making, the special terms they were negotiating. And in the dead of night, I was the consultant, sitting at my laptop, crafting carefully worded emails that stroked their egos, validated their financial genius, and slowly reeled them in. The consultant explained that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A majority stakeholder in the Mediterranean resort project was looking for a discreet, last-minute cash injection to avoid involving a major bank. In return for this liquidity, they were offering a hugely disproportionate equity stake. The returns would be astronomical, dwarfing anything their current investments could generate. But there was a catch, of course. The deal required a single lump-sum investment, the amount. Precisely the total of my inheritance plus a little more. The consultant told them the amount was non-negotiable. I watched them agonize. They didn't have enough liquid cash with just my inheritance. They would have to pull in their own money to meet the threshold. I saw the calculations in their eyes, the frantic hushed conversations. They were hooked. The potential payoff was too enormous for their greedy hearts to resist. His mother had some savings, some stocks. He had his own funds, separate from the secret family account. The consultant I had created was an artist of persuasion, playing on their every insecurity and desire. He spoke of legacy, of joining the ranks of the global elite, of a level of wealth they had only dreamed of. To seal the deal, I engineered a crisis. I had the consultant send a final, urgent email. Another investment group from Dubai had caught wind of the deal and was preparing a counteroffer. They had 48 hours to wire the full amount to a secure offshore holding account, or the opportunity would be lost forever. The panic was palpable. I watched as they scrambled, making frantic calls to their banks, liquidating their own assets. They were so consumed by the prize, so blinded by the dazzling future I had painted for them, they didn't see the trap closing around them. They saw me as the key, the unwitting provider of the seed money, while they were the masterminds closing the deal of a lifetime. The night before the transfer, my husband held me in his arms. "You were right to trust us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew was for the money, not for me. Everything we've done has been to build a better future for you, for us. After this, we'll be set for life. All our worries will be over." I leaned into him, my head on his chest, and smiled in the darkness. "I know," I whispered. "I'm so glad we're a team." His worries were just beginning. The trap was set, the bait was taken. All I had to do now was spring it. The morning of the wire transfer was thick with a nervous, electric energy. My husband and his mother were practically vibrating with anticipation, their eyes wide with the manic gleam of gamblers about to bet the house on a single roll of the dice. They huddled together over her laptop at the kitchen table, speaking in hushed, conspiratorial tones as they navigated the complexities of the international transfer. I made them coffee, my hands perfectly steady, my expression one of serene, supportive ignorance. I was a ghost in my own home, watching the final act of a play I had written and directed. They believed they were the protagonists of a thrilling financial drama. In reality, they were simply clowns walking onto a painted backdrop of a cliff. They liquidated everything. His mother cashed out her retirement portfolio, incurring massive penalties. My husband emptied his personal savings, the money he kept separate from his secret family's accounts. They pooled it all with the entirety of my stolen inheritance into the Shell Corporation's account. From there, they made the single monumental transfer to the offshore holding account provided by my brilliant Swiss consultant. The account, of course, was one I had established weeks prior under a new, anonymous corporate entity that was entirely and untraceably mine. As soon as the confirmation email pinged on her laptop, a wave of triumphant relief washed over them. They hugged each other, laughing with a joy that turned my stomach. "We did it," his mother breathed, her face flushed. "We actually did it." My husband turned to me, his eyes shining. "We're rich," he said, as if bestowing a great gift upon me. "Richer than you can ever imagine." Oh, I could imagine it. I had been imagining it for months. Now that their money, all of it, was safely under my control, it was time to lower the boom. The revenge I planned was not a single explosion, but a series of precise, devastating detonations. Phase 1 was the financial ruin. I waited a full 24 hours, letting them bask in their phantom wealth. They spent the day making plans, looking at luxury cars online, and browsing real estate in gated communities. Their arrogance was a spectacle to behold. The next afternoon, as they were planning a celebratory dinner, I made my move. I logged into my secure account, the one now holding all their worldly possessions, and I began to move the money. I didn't take it all for myself. I wired the exact amount of my original inheritance down to the last cent into a new trust I had set up in my name, managed by a legitimate and fearsome law firm. The rest of their money, every penny they had scraped together, I donated. I made large, anonymous contributions to a series of charities I knew they would despise: women's shelters, legal aid funds for victims of financial fraud, and a support network for single mothers. I made sure the donations were irrevocable. Their money was gone, scattered to the winds to do good in the world, a final, bitter irony. Phase 2 was the reveal. I chose the celebratory dinner they had planned for that evening as the venue. They had booked a table at the most expensive restaurant in the city. He wore a new suit for the occasion. She was adorned in jewelry, looking every bit the triumphant matriarch. I sat opposite them, a model of quiet composure. They toasted their success, their brilliance, their incredible future. "To us," my husband said, raising his champagne flute, "the perfect team." I let him finish his drink before I spoke. "There's a problem," I said, my voice calm and even. The smiles on their faces faltered. "What do you mean?" his mother asked, her tone sharp. I slid a folder across the table. It was thick with documents. "I mean," I said, my voice dropping to an icy whisper, "that the Swiss consultant, the Mediterranean resort, the Dubai investors, none of it was real." I watched their faces as the meaning of my words sank in, confusion warred with disbelief. "What are you talking about?" my husband stammered. "Of course it's real. We transferred the money." "Yes, you did," I confirmed. "You transferred all of your money and all of my money directly into an account that I control." I let that hang in the air for a moment, enjoying the dawning horror in their eyes. I opened the folder. "Let me show you my investment portfolio." One by one, I laid out the evidence on the white tablecloth, the screenshots of their text messages calling me their golden goose, the bank statements from his secret account with payments for his other family circled in red, a printout of my mother-in-law's name as the sole director of the Shell Corporation, and finally a photograph, the one from social media, my husband, his other woman, and their 2 children all smiling for the camera. His mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My husband's face went completely white. He looked as if he was going to be sick. "You knew," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I know everything," I corrected him. "I know that you and your mother conspired to steal my inheritance. I know that you have a secret family that you've been funding with my grandmother's legacy, and I know that as of about 4 o'clock this afternoon, you are both completely, utterly broke." The color drained from his mother's face. "The money," she croaked. "It's gone," I said cheerfully. "I've taken back what was mine, and the rest, I donated it to charity. Think of it as your contribution to helping battered women and defrauded wives, your legacy." The final phase was the fallout. As they sat there, stunned into silence in the middle of the crowded restaurant, I stood up. "My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow to begin divorce proceedings on the grounds of adultery and fraud. I'll be keeping the house, of course. You'll have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings." I turned to my mother-in-law, "And I'd expect a call from the IRS. Shell corporations with no actual business activity tend to attract their attention, especially when they're used to launder stolen money." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back, leaving them to implode in the wreckage of their own greed. The aftermath was exactly as I had planned. The divorce was swift and brutal. My evidence was so overwhelming that his lawyer advised him to accept any terms I offered. He was left with nothing but the clothes on his back and the massive debts he'd accrued living his double life. His secret family, upon discovering he was not the wealthy provider he'd pretended to be but a penniless fraud, wanted nothing more to do with him. His mother was ruined. The IRS investigation I had hinted at became a reality, and she was buried under a mountain of legal fees and penalties for tax evasion. Her reputation in her social circle was destroyed. They became pariahs, cautionary tales whispered about at cocktail parties. I sold the house, that beautiful stage for so many lies, and moved to a new city to start over. I used my grandmother's inheritance, the money she had worked so hard for, to build a new life, one based on truth and my own strength. I started my own business, I traveled, I learned to trust myself again. The pain of the betrayal never vanished completely, but it transformed from a gaping wound into a scar, a reminder not of my weakness but of the incredible strength I discovered when I was pushed to the absolute limit. They thought I was a fool, a pawn in their game, but a queen is the most powerful piece on the board, and in the end I checkmated them both. They were left with the one thing they deserved, each other, and a lifetime of bitter regret in the poverty of their own making. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Share this story with your friends and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Revenge Laura for more episodes.